The Elevator Incident. Michael's World. Michael Daniels, a young man of 19, navigated the bustling streets of downtown Los Angeles, his sneakers worn from miles of walking, his jeans faded and patched. Life hadn't been kind, but he managed with quiet resilience. Michael's mother worked tirelessly as a cleaner in one of the city's skyscrapers. Every week, Michael would visit her, bringing her a simple lunch or just stopping by to make sure she was okay. The sun hummed low in the sky as Michael approached the gleaming tower where his mother worked. The massive building loomed like a monument to wealth and power, its polished exterior reflecting the world outside. Michael adjusted his baseball cap and tugged his threadbare hoodie tighter, hoping to blend in. As he stepped through the glass doors, the cool air conditioning greeted him. The sight of the security guard by the front desk made Michael instinctively stiffen. He knew the drill. A quick once-over, a pause of suspicion, and then begrudging permission to pass. "Hey, kid," the guard called, his tone sharp. "You lost." Michael shook his head, keeping his voice steady. "No, sir. Here to see my mom. She works upstairs." The guard squinted, sizing him up, but eventually waved him through with a grunt. "Don't wander around." A ride to remember. The elevator doors gleamed, a mirror to Michael's lanky figure as he pressed the button for the 11th floor. A familiar hum accompanied the ascent. He leaned back, counting the lights as each floor passed. The doors slid open on the 6th floor, and a woman stepped in. She was striking. Dressed in a sharp navy suit, her hair in a tight bun. She carried herself with an air of authority, her perfume subtle yet commanding attention. Michael nodded politely, trying not to stare. She returned the nod, her focus on the elevator's display. Michael adjusted his cap again, feeling slightly out of place in her presence. The elevator resumed its climb, the air inside calm but tense. That calm shattered when a hand shoved through the closing doors. A man stepped in, his disheveled appearance contrasting starkly with the woman's pristine attire. He wore a wrinkled button-down shirt, his face twisted with frustration. Michael's instincts kicked in. The man's eyes darted between him and the woman, his demeanor jittery. Something about the way he moved set off alarms in Michael's head. A threat revealed. The elevator continued upward, but tension replaced the soothing hum. The man turned to the woman abruptly. "You think you can just walk away from me like that?" he hissed, his tone sharp and accusatory. The woman stiffened, clutching her purse tightly. She didn't respond, but her silence seemed to provoke the man further. "Hey," Michael interjected cautiously, stepping slightly forward. "Why don't you calm down?" The man turned his glare on Michael, his expression darkening. "Stay out of this, kid," he snapped. Michael held his ground, his pulse quickening. He didn't know what this man's intentions were, but the woman's tense posture and trembling hands told him it wasn't good. The elevator suddenly jerked to a stop. The lights flickered, and the display froze on a blinking 9. "We're stuck," Michael muttered, pressing the emergency button. The intercom buzzed to life, but no immediate response came. Courage takes root. The woman shifted nervously, her eyes darting toward the emergency panel. The man, however, seemed to take the confined space as an opportunity. "You can't ignore me now," he growled, stepping closer to her. Michael's heart pounded. He stepped between them, his voice firm despite the tremor in his hands. "Back off, man. Leave her alone." The man's attention shifted to Michael, his sneer growing. "And what are you gonna do, huh? You think you're some kind of hero?" Michael didn't flinch, though his palms were sweaty, his legs screaming at him to step back. "I'm just saying you don't want to make this worse," he replied, his voice steady. The man chuckled darkly, his eyes gleaming with malice. "You've got guts, kid, but guts won't get you far." The first clash. The woman's voice broke through the tension, trembling but strong. "Please, let's just wait for help. No one needs to get hurt." Her plea fell on deaf ears. The man reached into his pocket and Michael's stomach twisted as he glimpsed a flash of metal. A knife. Michael's breath hitched. He knew he was outmatched, but fear didn't stop him. It fueled him. Without thinking, he lunged, grabbing the man's wrist. The struggle was immediate and chaotic. The man snarled, twisting to free himself, but Michael held on with everything he had. The woman screamed, pressing herself against the wall. "Drop it!" Michael shouted, his voice filled with adrenaline. The knife clattered to the elevator floor, skidding out of reach. But the man wasn't done. He shoved Michael hard, sending him crashing into the metal wall. Pain radiated through Michael's back, but he pushed himself up, his resolve unbroken. "That's enough," he yelled. A turning point. The intercom buzzed to life, a security guard's voice crackling through. "What's going on in there?" "There's a man with a knife," Michael shouted, keeping his eyes locked on his opponent. "Get help now." The man sneered, but the sound of the intercom seemed to shake him. He backed away slightly, muttering curses under his breath. Michael didn't let his guard down. He stood protectively in front of the woman, his body a shield despite the ache in his limbs. The sound of distant voices and pounding footsteps echoed through the elevator shaft. Help was on the way. The man scowled, realizing his time was up. He shot Michael one last venomous glare before slumping against the wall, defeated. The woman's trembling voice broke the silence. "Thank you," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. Michael gave her a small, reassuring nod, though his own legs felt like jelly. "Just doing what anyone should," he said, his voice soft but steady. When the elevator doors finally opened, a team of security guards and police officers flooded in. Michael stepped aside, exhausted but relieved, as the man was taken into custody. Little did Michael know, his act of courage would set into motion events that would change his life forever. A life-altering morning. The weight of a moment. Michael spent the rest of that evening processing the surreal events in the elevator. His mother, tired from her long cleaning shift, embraced him tightly when she heard what had happened. "Michael, you could have been hurt. You didn't have to risk your life like that," she said, her voice trembling. Michael shrugged, trying to brush it off. "She needed help, Mom. I couldn't just stand there." Despite his brave words, his body ached from the man's shove, and his mind replayed the scene over and over. He barely slept that night, haunted by the man's rage-filled eyes and the gleam of the knife. He wasn't a hero. He had acted on instinct. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had stepped into something much bigger than himself. A knock at the door. The next morning, Michael woke to the sound of a loud knock on the door of their small apartment. His mother, who had already left for her early shift, wasn't home to answer. Grumbling, Michael pulled on a clean shirt and shuffled to the door. When he opened it, his jaw dropped. A sleek black limousine was parked on the curb outside their modest apartment complex, its polished exterior gleaming in the morning sun. A tall, sharply dressed man in a tailored suit stood on the porch, his posture straight and commanding. "Michael Daniels?" the man asked, his voice smooth but professional. Michael blinked, his brain scrambling to catch up. Yeah, that's me." The man smiled faintly. "My name is Mr. Hastings. I work for Ms. Alana Shaw. She's requested your presence this morning." "Miss Shaw?" Michael repeated, confused. The woman from the elevator, Mr. Hastings clarified. "She would like to speak with you." The ride of his life. Michael hesitated, his mind racing. Why would she want to talk to him? Was she upset? Maybe she didn't want him to have gotten involved at all. But before he could overthink, Mr. Hastings gestured to the limousine. "She's waiting, Mr. Daniels." Michael grabbed his cap and stepped outside, trying to shake off the surreal feeling of the moment. As he slid into the back seat of the limo, the cool leather seats and luxurious interior made him feel wildly out of place. He glanced nervously at Mr. Hastings, who was seated across from him, his expression unreadable. "Is everything okay?" Michael ventured, his voice cautious. "You'll see," Mr. Hastings replied cryptically. The limo glided smoothly through the streets of downtown, weaving between morning traffic. Michael stared out the window, the towering skyscrapers and bustling sidewalks a blur as his thoughts swirled. Meeting Alana Shaw. When the limo finally stopped in front of an imposing glass building, Michael's palms were damp with nerves. A doorman opened the vehicle's door, and Mr. Hastings led him into the lobby. Michael marveled at the sheer grandeur of the place. Gleaming marble floors, sparkling chandeliers, and walls lined with abstract art. They rode a private elevator to the top floor, where Mr. Hastings escorted him into a sprawling office with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a breathtaking view of the city. Sitting behind an elegant desk was the woman he had helped, Ms. Alana Shaw. Today, she wore a tailored white blazer, her dark hair pulled into a sleek ponytail. She looked up from her laptop and smiled warmly when she saw Michael. "Michael," she said, rising to greet him. "It's so good to see you again. Please, sit." Michael hesitated before taking the seat in one of the plush chairs across from her desk. He felt painfully aware of his scuffed sneakers and frayed jeans, but Alana's kind smile put him at ease. "Ms. Shaw, Please," she interrupted gently, "call me Alana. After what you did yesterday, there's no need for formalities." Michael nodded, swallowing hard. "Alana, I wasn't expecting this. I just did what anyone would have done." Alana's expression softened, and she leaned forward slightly. "That's where you're wrong, Michael. Most people would have frozen. Or worse, looked the other way. But you didn't. You put yourself in danger to help a complete stranger. That's rare." Michael ducked his head, his cheeks flushing. He wasn't used to being praised like this. "I didn't really think about it. I just couldn't let him hurt you." A stunning offer. Alana studied him for a moment, her eyes searching his face. Then she leaned back in her chair, her hands folded neatly on the desk. "Michael, I owe you a debt I can never fully repay," she began. "But I want to try." Michael's brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" Alana gestured toward Mr. Hastings, who stepped forward and handed Michael a sleek envelope. Michael opened it cautiously, his eyes widening as he saw what was inside. A scholarship certificate, emblazoned with the name of one of the city's most prestigious universities. "I've made arrangements for you to attend Harrison University," Alana explained. "Your tuition, books, and living expenses will be fully covered." Michael's mouth fell open. "What? I can't accept this. It's too much." Alana held up a hand to stop him. "Michael, you saved my life. This is the least I can do. Besides, I've done my homework. I know you're smart, hardworking, and capable of so much more than this city has given you. You deserve a chance to succeed." Michael stared at the certificate, his mind spinning. His dreams of higher education had always felt like a distant fantasy, out of reach for someone like him. And now it was being handed to him on a silver platter. "But why?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Alana's gaze was steady. "Because I believe in paying it forward. And because the world needs more people like you, brave, selfless, and determined. A new beginning." As the gravity of her words sank in, Michael felt his throat tighten. He hadn't cried in years, but the weight of her generosity threatened to break through his carefully built walls. "I don't know what to say," he finally managed. "Say you'll make the most of this opportunity," Alana replied with a smile. "That's all I ask." Michael nodded, his voice thick with emotion. "I will. I promise." As he left the building later that morning, the envelope clutched tightly in his hands, Michael felt a strange mix of disbelief and hope. His life had been changed in ways he could never have imagined, all because of a moment of courage in a cramped elevator. But he also knew that this was just the beginning. The road ahead would be challenging, but for the first time in a long time, Michael felt ready to face it, stepping into a new world. A whirlwind of changes. The days following Michael's meeting with Alana Shaw were a blur of emotions and preparations. He could hardly believe the turn his life had taken. One moment, he was navigating a routine day in his neighborhood. The next, he was holding a scholarship certificate to one of the most prestigious universities in the country. News of his act of bravery in the elevator had spread throughout his community. Neighbors who barely acknowledged him before now stopped him on the street to offer congratulations or pats on the back. For the first time, Michael felt like people saw him as more than just another kid from the block. His mother, though overwhelmed with pride, worried about the sudden shift. "Are you sure about this, Michael?" she asked as she packed his belongings into a second-hand suitcase. "It's a whole new world out there, and they're not always kind to people like us." Michael looked up from folding his favorite hoodie, his face set with determination. "Mom, I have to try. This is my chance to make something of myself. For both of us." She sighed, her eyes misty. "I know, baby. Just promise me you'll stay true to yourself." He nodded, hugging her tightly. "I will, Mom. I promise." First impressions. The morning Michael arrived at Harrison University felt surreal. The sprawling campus was a stark contrast to the cracked sidewalks and aging apartment buildings of his neighborhood. Towering brick halls, manicured lawns, and students zipping around on bicycles made it look like a scene from a movie. Michael clutched the campus map Alana had provided, feeling like a fish out of water. His sneakers squeaked against the polished floors of the admissions office as he checked in. "Welcome to Harrison, Mr. Daniels," the receptionist said with a professional smile. "Your dorm assignment and schedule are ready. If you need anything, don't hesitate to ask." Michael thanked her and headed toward his dormitory, his duffel bag slung over his shoulder. He couldn't help but notice the curious stares from other students as he passed. His worn clothes and nervous demeanor stood out among the designer jackets and confident strides of his peers. A rocky start. When Michael entered his dorm room, he was greeted by a meticulously organized side of the room. Neatly made bed, a shelf of books alphabetized, and even a small potted plant on the windowsill. His side of the room, by contrast, was bare and empty except for the worn suitcase he placed on the bed. A few minutes later, his roommate walked in. He was tall, blond, and dressed in expensive athleisure. He glanced at Michael and paused, his expression neutral but guarded. "Hey," the guy said, setting down his bag. "You must be Michael. I'm Ethan." Michael extended his hand. "Nice to meet you." Ethan shook it briefly before pulling out his phone and typing something. The silence stretched uncomfortably as Michael unpacked. He couldn't help but wonder if Ethan was judging him. "So, what's your major?" Ethan asked eventually, breaking the awkward silence. "Undecided," Michael admitted. "I'm just trying to figure it all out." Ethan nodded, but the conversation fizzled out. Michael could feel the unspoken gulf between them. An unexpected ally. Classes began the next day, and Michael quickly realized he was playing catch-up. The lectures were fast-paced, the professors unrelenting, and the assignments piled up before he could catch his breath. During his first economics class, he fumbled to take notes, his pen scratching furiously against the paper. The other students seemed so at ease, their laptops clicking away efficiently. At the end of the lecture, as Michael packed his notebook, a girl approached him. She had curly brown hair, glasses perched on her nose, and an easy smile. "Hey," she said. "I'm Sarah. You looked a little lost back there." Michael chuckled nervously. "Yeah, I guess I'm not used to this pace yet." "Don't worry. It takes some time," Sarah said, handing him a neatly typed summary of the lecture. "Here, this might help." Michael stared at the paper in surprise. "Thanks. You didn't have to do that." Sarah shrugged. "You looked like you could use a hand. We all need help sometimes." Her kindness was a breath of fresh air, and Michael felt a spark of hope, a taste of prejudice. Despite moments of support, Michael couldn't escape the subtle reminders that he didn't entirely belong. In group discussions, some students barely acknowledged his ideas. During a campus mixer, he overheard whispers about his scholarship kid status. One afternoon, while waiting in line at the campus cafe, a guy behind him muttered loudly, "This place sure is lowering its standards." Michael's fists clenched, but he forced himself to let it go. He had bigger things to focus on than petty remarks. Later that day, during a study session in the library, Sarah noticed his distant expression. "Everything okay?" Michael hesitated before nodding. "Yeah, just a lot on my mind." Sarah tilted her head, studying him. "You know, you don't have to prove anything to anyone. You're here for a reason." Her words lingered with him, a small anchor in the storm of doubt, a lesson in resilience. The weeks passed, and Michael threw himself into his studies, determined to prove he deserved his place at Harrison. He spent late nights in the library, poring over textbooks and typing out essays on borrowed computers. Ethan, though initially aloof, began to warm up to him. One evening, as Michael struggled with a statistics problem, Ethan leaned over from his desk. "Want some help with that?" he asked. Michael hesitated before nodding. "Yeah, actually. Thanks." As they worked through the problem together, Michael realized that Ethan wasn't as unapproachable as he had seemed. "You've got a good head for this," Ethan remarked. "You just need confidence." Michael smiled faintly. "Working on it." An invitation. One Friday evening, as Michael returned from the library, he found a letter slipped under his dorm room door. It was embossed with the seal of Shaw Enterprises. Inside was a handwritten note from Alana. "Dear Michael, I hope this letter finds you well. I wanted to check in and see how you're settling in. If you're free this weekend, I'd like to invite you to dinner at my home. Consider it a chance to catch up and a break from campus life. Let me know if you're interested. Warm regards, Alana Shaw." Michael stared at the letter, his heart pounding. He couldn't help but wonder what she had in mind. That weekend, dressed in the nicest shirt he owned, Michael stepped into the world of Alana Shaw once again, not realizing that this dinner would bring new revelations and challenges that would shape his journey further. Dinner with Alana Shaw. An invitation accepted. Saturday evening arrived with a blend of excitement and nerves for Michael. He stood in front of the mirror in his dorm room, adjusting the collar of his best button-down shirt. It was slightly too big, a hand-me-down from a neighbor, but it was all he had. "Big plans," Ethan asked from his desk, glancing up from his laptop. "Dinner with someone who helped me out," Michael said vaguely. Ethan raised an eyebrow, but didn't press further. A sleek black car was waiting for Michael outside the dormitory. The driver, dressed in a crisp suit, nodded politely as Michael slid into the backseat. The ride to Alana Shaw's estate was smooth and silent, the hum of the car's engine barely audible over Michael's racing thoughts. The estate. When the car pulled up to Alana's home, Michael's eyes widened in awe. The estate was sprawling, surrounded by manicured gardens that seemed to glow under the setting sun. A fountain gurgled softly in the circular driveway, and the house itself was a masterpiece of modern architecture. Glass walls, clean lines, and warm lighting that spilled onto the driveway. A butler opened the door and greeted Michael with a polite smile. "Ms. Shaw is expecting you. Please, follow me." Michael was led through a grand foyer, where abstract art hung on the walls, and the floor gleamed like polished marble. He suddenly felt very aware of his scuffed sneakers and frayed cuffs. Alana appeared at the end of the hallway, dressed in an elegant yet understated evening gown. Her warm smile put Michael slightly at ease. "Michael, I'm so glad you could make it," she said, extending a hand. "Thank you for inviting me," Michael replied, shaking her hand. "This place is incredible." Alana chuckled. "It's just a house. Come, let's talk." An intimate setting. Rather than the grand dining room Michael expected, Alana led him to a cozy patio overlooking the garden. The table was set for two, with soft candlelight casting a warm glow. "I figured we'd keep things simple," Alana said as they sat down. I wanted to hear how you've been settling in at Harrison. Michael hesitated, unsure of how much to reveal. It's different, he admitted. I'm learning a lot, but it's overwhelming sometimes. Alana nodded thoughtfully. I imagine it's a big adjustment, but you're handling it well, I'm sure. The first course arrived, delicate plates of salad with ingredients Michael couldn't even name. He picked at the food cautiously, not wanting to seem ungrateful. Alana noticed his hesitation. Michael, relax. This isn't a job interview. Just be yourself. He smiled sheepishly. Sorry. I guess I'm just not used to all of this. A deeper conversation. As the meal progressed, Alana began to ask more pointed questions. You know, I've been curious about you, Michael. Why did you step in that day in the elevator? Most people would have stayed silent or pretended not to notice. Michael put his fork down, his expression serious. I don't know. I guess I've seen too much of people looking the other way when something bad happens. My mom always taught me to stand up for what's right, even if it's hard. Alana's gaze softened. She sounds like a remarkable woman. She is, Michael said, his voice filled with pride. She's the strongest person I know. She's been through so much but never gave up. I guess I wanted to be like that. Alana leaned back, studying him with a mixture of admiration and curiosity. You have a rare quality, Michael. Courage isn't something you see every day. And it's why I wanted to help you. Michael frowned slightly, his fingers tracing the edge of his glass. I've been meaning to ask, why me? You could have just thanked me and moved on. But you went out of your way to change my life. Alana's expression grew serious. Because someone did the same for me once. Alana's story. Michael's eyes widened in surprise as Alana began to share a piece of her past. When I was your age, I wasn't living in places like this, she said, gesturing around the patio. I grew up in a rough neighborhood, much like yours. My parents worked 3 jobs between them just to keep food on the table. Michael listened intently, leaning forward. One day, I found myself in a dangerous situation, Alana continued. It was a random act of violence, but someone stepped in. A stranger who didn't know me anything. He risked his life to protect me. And that moment changed everything. I realized how rare it was for someone to put themselves on the line for another person. What happened to him? Michael asked. Alana smiled wistfully. He survived, but I never saw him again. I don't even know his name, but his courage stayed with me. It inspired me to work hard, to build something meaningful so I could help others. When I saw what you did in that elevator, I saw a piece of him in you. Michael sat in stunned silence, the weight of her words sinking in. An unexpected proposal. After dessert was served, a delicate chocolate mousse that Michael hesitated to eat because it looked like art, Alana leaned forward, her tone shifting. Michael, I want to make you an offer, she said. Michael blinked. Another offer. Alana nodded. Yes, the scholarship is just the beginning. I want to mentor you, to help you navigate this new world you've stepped into. You have potential, but potential needs guidance. What do you say? Michael's heart raced. The idea of having someone like Alana as a mentor was both exhilarating and terrifying. I don't know what to say, he admitted. Say yes, Alana said with a smile. Michael grinned, feeling a rare surge of confidence. Yes, I'd like that. A glimmer of hope. As Michael left the estate that night, the crisp air filling his lungs, he felt a strange mix of emotions, gratitude, hope, and a touch of disbelief. The ride back to campus was quiet, but his thoughts were anything but. Alana's faith in him felt like a weight and a gift all at once. For the first time in his life, Michael felt like the future wasn't just a distant concept. It was something he could reach out and shape. He didn't know what challenges lay ahead, but he knew one thing for certain. He wasn't alone anymore. And that made all the difference. A night of revelation. A glimpse of luxury. As the limousine pulled away from the estate, Michael stared out of the tinted window, his mind racing. The lush gardens and towering columns of Alana Shaw's home seemed like something out of a dream, a world so far removed from his own that it felt unreal. He fiddled with the invitation in his pocket, the formal script, the gold-embossed seal. It was more than just a piece of paper. It was a symbol of change, a door opening to a world he never imagined entering. As the limousine turned onto the main road, Michael noticed the driver glancing at him in the rearview mirror. "Impressive place, huh?" the driver said, breaking the silence. Michael nodded, unsure how to respond. "Yeah, it's amazing. I've never seen anything like it." "You'll get used to it," the driver said with a knowing smile. "Ms. Shaw has a way of bringing people into her world. If she sees potential in you, you're in good hands." Michael mulled over those words for the rest of the ride, wondering what Alana saw in him that was worth investing in. Returning to reality. When Michael returned to campus, the familiar sights of the dormitory brought him back to earth. The narrow hallways smelled faintly of cleaning products and microwave dinners, a stark contrast to the fragrant gardens and polished floors of Alana's estate. As he opened the door to his dorm room, Ethan looked up from his laptop. "Late night?" Ethan asked, his tone neutral but curious. "Something like that," Michael replied, tossing his jacket onto his bed. He wasn't sure how much he wanted to share, not because he didn't trust Ethan, but because it all felt so personal, almost sacred. Ethan leaned back in his chair, stretching. "Well, you look like you've had one hell of a night. If you ever want to talk about it, I'm here." Michael nodded, grateful for the offer, but still unsure of how to put everything into words. A late-night reflection. As the campus settled into its usual nighttime quiet, Michael found himself unable to sleep. He sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the scholarship certificate Alana had given him. The weight of her story, her faith in him, and her offer of mentorship all swirled in his mind. Michael had spent so much of his life just surviving, scraping by, taking care of his mom, and trying to avoid the pitfalls of his neighborhood. For the first time, he felt like someone was giving him permission to dream. But with that came a sense of responsibility. What if he failed? What if he wasn't good enough to live up to Alana's expectations? The doubts gnawed at him, but Michael shook his head firmly. "No, she believed in me for a reason. I can't let her down." The next step. The next morning, Michael woke with a renewed sense of determination. He decided to approach Alana's offer of mentorship with everything he had. After all, she had taken a chance on him. He owed it to her, and to himself, to make it count. During his first class of the day, Michael found himself more focused than ever. He asked questions, took detailed notes, and even stayed after class to discuss the material with the professor. By lunchtime, Sarah caught up with him in the campus cafe. "Hey, you seem different today," she said, sliding into the seat across from him. Michael shrugged, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Just trying to stay on top of things." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "You're motivated. I like it. But don't burn yourself out, okay?" Michael chuckled. "I'll try not to." Alana's first lesson. Later that evening, Michael received a text message from Alana. "Michael, I'd like to start our mentorship this week. Let's meet Friday afternoon. Bring a notebook." Excitement and nerves surged through him. He wasn't sure what to expect, but he knew he couldn't let this opportunity slip through his fingers. When Friday arrived, Michael found himself standing in Alana's private office, a space filled with sleek furniture, inspirational books, and a wall of awards and accolades. Alana greeted him warmly. "Michael, it's good to see you. Are you ready to get started?" "Yes," he replied, clutching his notebook. "Good," Alana said, gesturing for him to sit. "Our first lesson is about vision. I want you to think about what you want, not just for now, but for the future. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? 10 years? Michael hesitated, the question catching him off guard. No one had ever asked him about his future before, at least not in a way that made it seem like it mattered. I'm not sure," he admitted. I've been so focused on getting through each day that I haven't thought that far ahead. Alana smiled gently. That's okay. Most people don't. But I want you to start thinking about it now. Because if you don't define your goals, someone else will define them for you. Michael nodded, scribbling down her words. Here's your first task, Alana continued. Write down 3 goals you want to achieve in the next year. They don't have to be big, just meaningful to you. Bring them to me next week, and we'll build from there. A new kind of homework. As Michael left Alana's office, he felt both inspired and overwhelmed. The task seemed simple, but it was uncharted territory for him. What did he want? What was worth pursuing? That night, he sat in his dorm room, staring at a blank page in his notebook. Slowly, he began to write. Earn a 4.0 GPA this semester. Make my mom proud by showing her I belong at Harrison. Find a way to give back, like Alana did for me. As he read over the goals, a small smile crept onto his face. For the first time, Michael felt like he was taking control of his destiny. The next week couldn't come soon enough. Rising to the challenge. The burden of goals. The week following Alana's mentorship session was both invigorating and intimidating for Michael. With his list of goals tucked into the back of his notebook, he threw himself into his studies like never before. The library became his second home, and late nights were no longer an exception but the norm. However, the pressure began to weigh on him. Michael wasn't just trying to succeed for himself. He felt like he was carrying the hopes of his mother, Alana, and everyone who had ever doubted him. The weight was heavy, and at times, it felt suffocating. During one particularly long night in the library, Sarah found him slumped over his notebook, his pen barely moving. She sat across from him and nudged his coffee cup toward him. Michael, you've been at this for hours. You're going to burn out, she said, her voice full of concern. He looked up, his eyes tired but determined. I can't stop, Sarah. There's too much riding on this. Sarah sighed, leaning back in her chair. I get it, but you're no good to anyone if you're running on empty. Take a break. Let your brain breathe. Michael hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. Maybe just for a few minutes. Finding support. Despite the challenges, Michael began to notice small victories. His professors started to recognize his efforts, occasionally calling on him in class to share his insights. Ethan, who had been distant at first, became a quiet source of support, often leaving sticky notes with encouraging messages on Michael's desk. You've got this, one note read, accompanied by a doodle of a thumbs up. Even the whispers and stares from some of his peers began to bother him less. Michael realized that their opinions didn't define him. His actions did. One afternoon, while walking to class, Michael ran into Alana, who was visiting the campus for a board meeting. She smiled when she saw him and pulled him aside for a brief chat. How's everything going? She asked, her tone warm but probing. It's a lot, Michael admitted, but I'm managing. Alana's expression softened. Remember, Michael, it's okay to ask for help. Success isn't about doing everything alone. It's about knowing when to lean on others. Her words stayed with him, giving him permission to rely on the support of those around him. Challenges multiply. As the semester progressed, Michael found himself juggling more responsibilities than he had anticipated. In addition to his coursework, he began volunteering at a community center near campus, inspired by his third goal of giving back. The center was a modest but lively place, filled with children from underprivileged neighborhoods who came for tutoring and activities. Michael spent hours helping them with their homework, his own struggles giving him a unique ability to connect with them. One evening, as he packed up his things after a tutoring session, the center's director, Mrs. Rivera, approached him. Michael, you've been a tremendous help to these kids, she said, her voice warm. They look up to you. Have you thought about taking on a more permanent role here? Michael hesitated, torn between his desire to help and the mounting demands of his studies. I'd love to, but I'm not sure if I can handle it all. Mrs. Rivera nodded, her expression understanding. Think about it. Sometimes, giving back has a way of giving you more in return. Pushing through doubt. That night, Michael wrestled with his doubts, the pressure of balancing his classes, volunteering, and Alana's mentorship was overwhelming. For the first time since arriving at Harrison, he questioned whether he was truly cut out for this life. During their next mentorship session, Alana noticed his hesitation. "You're quieter than usual today," she observed, her sharp eyes studying him. Michael sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I'm just feeling stretched thin. I want to do it all, but I don't know if I can." Alana leaned forward, her tone firm but encouraging. "Michael, growth is uncomfortable. It stretches you, challenges you, and forces you to confront your limits. But it's also where the magic happens. Don't let fear hold you back." Her words sparked something in him. He realized that while the road ahead was daunting, he had already come further than he ever thought possible. A new opportunity. A few days later, Michael's resolve was tested in an unexpected way. He received an email inviting him to apply for a prestigious internship program at a major financial firm, an opportunity that could change the trajectory of his career. The application process was rigorous, requiring a personal essay, recommendations, and an interview. Michael debated whether to apply, knowing it would add even more to his plate. He sought advice from Sarah, who immediately encouraged him. "This is huge, Michael. You've got to go for it. Don't let self-doubt hold you back." Ethan chimed in later that evening. "You've already proven you can handle more than most people. This is just one more challenge." Bolstered by their support, Michael decided to apply. He poured hours into crafting his essay, drawing from his life experiences and his time at the community center. The interview. The day of the interview arrived, and Michael found himself sitting in a sleek conference room, surrounded by other applicants dressed in sharp suits. He felt out of place in his borrowed blazer, but he reminded himself of Alana's advice. "Focus on what you bring to the table, not what others think of you." When it was his turn, Michael walked into the interview room with his head held high. The panel of interviewers greeted him with polite smiles, their questions probing into his background, ambitions, and problem-solving skills. Michael spoke from the heart, sharing stories of his upbringing, his work at the community center, and the lessons he'd learned from Alana. By the end of the interview, he felt drained but proud. He had given it his all, and now it was out of his hands. A turning point. 2 weeks later, Michael received a phone call that left him speechless. He had been selected for the internship. The news spread quickly, and congratulations poured in from his professors, Sarah, and even Ethan, who gave him a rare fist bump. Michael couldn't wait to tell Alana, who beamed with pride when he shared the news during their next meeting. "I knew you had it in you," she said. "This is just the beginning, Michael. Keep pushing, and the world will open up to you." That night, as Michael sat alone in his dorm room, he reflected on how far he had come. The challenges hadn't disappeared, but he had grown stronger, more resilient, and more confident. For the first time, Michael didn't just see himself as a survivor. He saw himself as someone capable of greatness, and he was ready to embrace whatever came next. A new horizon. The weight of success. The realization that he had earned the prestigious internship filled Michael with a mix of pride and trepidation. While he was excited about the opportunity, he knew it meant even greater responsibility. With finals approaching, his volunteering at the community center, and Alana's mentorship sessions, he wondered how he could possibly manage it all. But something inside him refused to let the doubt take over. This was what he had worked for, a chance to prove himself, to break free from the life he had always known. The night after the announcement, Michael called his mom to share the news. Her reaction was exactly what he needed. "Oh, Michael, I'm so proud of you." Her voice trembled with emotion. "You've always had so much potential. I knew you'd make something of yourself." Her words were a balm to his soul. No matter how hard things got, he reminded himself that he was doing this not just for himself, but for her as well. A shift in perspective. As Michael prepared for his first day of the internship, he couldn't shake the memory of what Alana had told him during their last session. Don't just see this as a job. See it as a classroom. Learn everything you can. That advice resonated with him as he stepped into the towering office building downtown. The lobby was bustling with professionals in tailored suits, the energy palpable. Michael adjusted his tie, borrowed from Ethan, and took a deep breath. Time to show them what I'm made of, he whispered to himself. The first day was overwhelming. Meetings, introductions, and a flood of information left his head spinning, but Michael kept his composure. By the end of the day, he had made a point to introduce himself to everyone he could and ask thoughtful questions. When his supervisor, a sharp-witted woman named Ms. Harper, stopped by his desk, she smiled approvingly. You're eager. I like that. Keep it up, Daniels. Balancing the scales, the internship added another layer of complexity to Michael's already packed schedule. His days became a carefully orchestrated balancing act. Mornings were spent in class, afternoons at the internship, evenings at the community center, and late nights in the library. Sarah noticed the change in him. You're like a machine these days, she said during one of their study sessions. Michael chuckled, rubbing his eyes. Feels like it sometimes, but I can't afford to slow down. You know it's okay to ask for help, right? Sarah said gently. Michael nodded, appreciating her concern. But deep down, he felt that this was a burden he needed to carry himself. Unexpected challenges. One afternoon at the community center, Michael found himself dealing with a particularly challenging student. Marcus, a 12-year-old with a quick temper, refused to sit still during tutoring sessions. I don't need help, Marcus snapped, pushing his workbook away. What's the point anyway? People like us don't get anywhere. The words hit Michael like a punch to the gut. He saw himself in Marcus. The same anger, the same hopelessness he had felt years ago. Marcus, Michael said, his voice calm but firm. I get it. I've been where you are. But giving up doesn't solve anything. You're smarter than you think, and you deserve a shot at something better. Let me help you. Marcus stared at him, his defiance wavering. Slowly, he picked up his pencil and returned to the workbook. That small victory reminded Michael why he was doing this. It wasn't just about proving himself. It was about lifting others up, just like Alana had done for him. Recognition and responsibility. As weeks turned into months, Michael began to stand out at his internship. His attention to detail, work ethic, and willingness to learn didn't go unnoticed. Ms. Harper pulled him aside one day after a team presentation. Michael, I've been impressed with your performance, she said. There's an opportunity to work on a high-profile project, but it's going to be demanding. I think you're ready, but it's your call. Michael hesitated, the weight of the decision pressing on him. Taking on the project would mean even less time for everything else, but it was an opportunity he couldn't pass up. I'm in, he said confidently. The project was grueling, involving late nights and tight deadlines, but Michael thrived under the pressure. His ability to juggle multiple responsibilities became a point of admiration among his colleagues. A growing support network. Throughout it all, Michael leaned on the support of those around him more than ever. Sarah became his sounding board, offering advice and encouragement whenever he felt overwhelmed. Ethan, though not always vocal, showed his support through small gestures, like leaving coffee on Michael's desk or helping him prep for presentations. Even Alana continued to play a pivotal role, offering wisdom and perspective during their regular meetings. You're proving something to yourself, Michael, she said during one session. That you can rise to the occasion, no matter how high the stakes. Keep that mindset, and there's nothing you can't achieve. The day of reckoning. The culmination of Michael's hard work came during a presentation for the internship's senior executives. He had spent weeks preparing, pouring his heart and soul into the project. As he stood in the boardroom, facing a panel of executives, he felt the familiar flutter of nerves. But instead of letting them consume him, he channeled them into focus. Michael delivered his presentation with confidence, his voice steady and his points clear. By the time he finished, the room was silent for a moment before erupting in applause. Miss Harper approached him afterward, her smile genuine. "You've got something special, Daniels. Keep it up." A moment of reflection. That evening, as Michael sat alone in his dorm room, he reflected on how far he had come. The kid who once felt invisible in a crowded elevator was now standing tall in a world that once seemed out of reach. He pulled out his notebook and flipped to the page where he had written his goals months ago. Earn a 4.0 GPA this semester. Make my mom proud by showing her I belong at Harrison. Find a way to give back, like Alana did for me. He smiled as he realized he was well on his way to achieving all three. For the first time, Michael didn't feel like he was chasing something unattainable. He felt like he was exactly where he was meant to be. The fruits of sacrifice. A new chapter. Michael's final semester at Harrison University was a whirlwind of emotions. With the internship under his belt, a solid GPA, and a growing sense of purpose, he was no longer the same young man who had entered those halls uncertain and overwhelmed. Yet, as his achievements mounted, so did the weight of expectation. One of the community center kids, Marcus, summed it up best during a tutoring session. "You're like Superman, Mr. Daniels," Marcus said, his pencil scratching against his workbook. "You do all this stuff, but you still come here to help us." Michael laughed, but the words stayed with him. He didn't feel like a superhero. He felt like someone just trying to keep his head above water. Unforeseen challenges. As graduation loomed, Michael received another opportunity, an offer to join the financial firm where he had interned. It was a dream come true, but it came with a catch. The position was in New York City, far from his mother, the community center, and the life he had built. Michael spent sleepless nights wrestling with the decision. On one hand, it was a chance to launch his career and secure a future he had always dreamed of. On the other, it meant leaving behind the people and places that had shaped him. During one of his final mentorship sessions with Alana, he laid out his dilemma. "I don't know what to do," Michael admitted, his voice heavy with uncertainty. "I want to take the job, but it feels like I'm abandoning everything I care about." Alana listened intently, her expression thoughtful. "Michael, every choice comes with sacrifice. The question isn't what you're giving up, it's what you're gaining. What's your vision for the future? What path gets you closer to it?" Her words struck a chord, and Michael realized he needed to think beyond the immediate challenges. A decision made. After much deliberation, Michael decided to accept the offer. The decision was bittersweet, but he knew it was the right one. The community center held a small farewell party for him, complete with homemade cards and heartfelt speeches from the kids. Marcus stood awkwardly at the front of the room, holding a crumpled piece of paper. "You're the first person who ever told me I could do more," Marcus said, his voice shaking. "I'm gonna miss you, but I promise I won't give up. I'll make you proud." Michael's throat tightened as he hugged the boy. "You've already made me proud, Marcus. Keep working hard." Graduation day. The day of graduation was a celebration of Michael's journey. His mother beamed with pride as she watched him cross the stage, her tears falling freely as she snapped pictures with an old digital camera. After the ceremony, Alana found him amidst the crowd. She hugged him warmly and handed him a small, elegantly wrapped box. "Open it when you're alone," she said with a smile. Later that evening, in the quiet of his dorm room, Michael unwrapped the gift. Inside was a sleek leather journal with a handwritten note tucked inside the cover. "Michael, this is the beginning of your story, not the end. Use this journal to chart your dreams, your challenges, and your victories. Remember, success isn't just about what you achieve. It's about who you lift along the way. With pride and faith in your future, Alana." Michael ran his fingers over the journal's cover, his chest tightening with gratitude. Starting over in New York. The move to New York was both thrilling and intimidating. The city was a sprawling, chaotic maze of opportunity and challenge, and Michael found himself navigating a new kind of hustle. His role at the financial firm was demanding, but his time at the internship had prepared him well. In the evenings, he often thought about home. The cracked sidewalks of his old neighborhood, the kids at the community center, and the warmth of his mother's kitchen. Those memories kept him grounded as he tackled the high-stakes world of corporate finance. Unexpected connections. One evening, as Michael worked late at the office, his phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Hi, Michael. It's Marcus. I just wanted to let you know I got an A on my math test today. Thanks for believing in me." Michael smiled, his heart swelling with pride. He quickly typed a response. "That's amazing, Marcus. Keep up the great work. I'm always here if you need advice." The exchange reminded him of Alana's words about lifting others as he climbed. A surprising encounter. Months into his new job, Michael attended a networking event at a high-end hotel. As he sipped his drink and mingled with colleagues, he spotted a familiar figure across the room. It was Alana Shaw. She was engaged in conversation with a group of executives, her presence commanding the room as always. When she saw Michael, her face lit up. "Michael," she called, walking over to him. "I was wondering when I'd run into you in this city." They caught up briefly, and Alana introduced him to several influential people. Michael marveled at how seamlessly she moved through the crowd, her confidence and charisma shining. "You've come a long way," she said as the event wound down. "I'm proud of you, Michael. Don't forget to keep pushing yourself, and always pay it forward." Giving back. Inspired by Alana's continued mentorship, Michael began seeking ways to give back in New York. He started volunteering at a local youth organization, mentoring teenagers who reminded him of his younger self. One day, as he was leaving the center, a young girl approached him. "Mr. Daniels, do you really think people like us can make it out there?" Michael knelt down to her level, his voice steady and sincere. "I don't just think it. I know it. Because I've been where you are, and I made it. And so can you." The beginning of legacy. Years later, as Michael stood in his own office overlooking the New York skyline, he reflected on his journey. The scared, uncertain boy from the elevator had become a man with purpose and vision. On his desk sat the leather journal Alana had given him, now filled with notes, sketches, and reflections from the years since. As he picked it up, he smiled, knowing that his story wasn't just about him. It was about everyone who had walked beside him, lifted him up, and inspired him to keep going. And his story was far from over. A legacy in motion, a reflection on the journey. Michael Daniels had come a long way, and his success was undeniable. Yet even with a thriving career and a steady life in New York, he often found himself revisiting the pivotal moments that had shaped him. Sitting in his office late one evening, he flipped through the pages of the leather journal Alana had given him. The entries were a map of his life, each page a snapshot of his struggles, victories, and lessons learned. As he turned the pages, his fingers lingered on a passage he had written years ago. "If I ever make it, it won't just be for me. It'll be for the kid in the community center who thinks dreams are for other people, for the mother who worked her hands raw so her son could have a chance, and for the stranger in the elevator who saw a frightened boy and believed in his courage." Michael closed the journal with a deep breath. It was time to act on those words. The next step. Over the next few months, Michael began laying the groundwork for a new initiative, a nonprofit organization aimed at mentoring underprivileged youth. Drawing from his experiences at the community center, his mentorship with Alana, and his own journey, he envisioned a program that would provide education, resources, and guidance for young people striving to break free from cycles of poverty and hopelessness. He named the organization Elevate, a tribute to the elevator incident that had changed his life forever. The launch event for Elevate was a humble but heartfelt affair, held in a community center not unlike the one where Michael had once volunteered. Kids, parents, and mentors filled the room, their faces a mix of hope and curiosity. Michael stood at the front, addressing the crowd. "When I was your age, I didn't think opportunities like this were meant for people like me," he began. "But I learned something important. We're not defined by where we start. We're defined by how we choose to move forward and who we help along the way. The applause that followed was thunderous, and Michael felt a sense of fulfillment he hadn't experienced since his first night at Harrison. A reunion of fate. As Elevate grew, Michael received a message from someone he hadn't seen in years. It was from Alana Shaw. "Michael," the message read, "I'm so proud of what you've built with Elevate. I'd love to see it in person. Let me know when I can visit." When Alana arrived at the organization's headquarters, now a bustling hub of activity, she was visibly moved. The walls were lined with photos of mentors and students, success stories captured in vibrant frames. "You've done it, Michael," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You've turned your story into something that will change lives for generations." Michael smiled, his gratitude evident. "I couldn't have done it without you. You showed me what it means to pay it forward." Alana placed a hand on his shoulder. "And now you're showing the world." A full circle moment. One day, years after the launch of Elevate, Michael received a call from Marcus, the boy he had mentored at the community center. Marcus was now an adult, working as a teacher in the same neighborhood where he had grown up. "I just wanted to thank you," Marcus said. "You believed in me when no one else did. I wouldn't be here without you." Michael's chest swelled with pride. "You did the hard work, Marcus. I'm just glad I could be part of your journey." As he hung up, Michael felt a profound sense of closure. The cycle of mentorship and empowerment he had experienced was now continuing through the people he had helped. The final reflection. One evening, Michael stood on the balcony of his apartment, overlooking the glittering lights of New York City. He held the leather journal in his hands, flipping to the last blank page. He wrote, "This is not the end of my story. It's the beginning of countless others. Every act of kindness, every moment of courage, creates ripples that stretch beyond what we can see. If I've learned anything, it's this. We all have the power to change the world, one person at a time." Michael closed the journal and smiled, the weight of his journey giving way to the lightness of purpose. And as the city buzzed with life below, Michael Daniels knew he had found his place in the world, not as a boy defined by his circumstances, but as a man who had chosen to rise above them. His story would live on in the lives he touched, proving that even the smallest acts of courage can lead to extraordinary transformations.